Good evening. So, we've been studying the verb gustar, and specifically, we've been using indirect object pronouns me, te, le, nos, and les with the verb gustar because, as we've studied, as we've talked about, the verb gustar does not mean to like, it means to please or to be pleasing to. And so, we kind of have to turn that around in our minds. If I want to say in Spanish, I like Pepsi, I have to say Pepsi pleases me, or Pepsi is pleasing to me. Me gusta la Pepsi. Now, when I say it that way, then the word Pepsi is actually the subject of the sentence. It's what's doing something. And what's it doing? It's pleasing me. If I want to say, I don't like, what can I say I don't like? I don't like those cars. I say, no me gustan esos carros. What I'm literally saying is those cars do not please me, or they are not pleasing to me. So once again, those cars become the subject, and I become the individual or the entity that is or is not pleased. Now, as I was talking about, there are a lot of other verbs that are like that. And we're going to look at a few of them tonight. So if you'll get your notebook out and get ready, we're just going to go through and talk about some verbs that operate just like gustar. And the thing that is really interesting about this, the thing that is fascinating, is we can get into a lot of expressions that are very contemporary, even a little colloquial, sound natural in English, and we can learn how to use this to make them sound naturally in Spanish. That's going to keep us from having to look up a lot of different words. So this is going to give us a way to talk about a lot of everyday things. So let's start off with the verb doler tonight. Now, the verb doler means to hurt or to be painful to. And I'm going to use that with my indirect object pronouns. So if something hurts me, me duele. If something hurts you, te duele. If something hurts us, nos duele. Now, what I've done is I've listed the verb doler for you, but I've given you the conjugations, but I've only done so in the third person singular, the third person plural. Because generally, when we use any of these, we're talking about something or doing something. And so if we're talking about something, or if we're talking about doing something, we're going to use the third person singular form of the verb, just like we did with gustar. The only time we're going to put an N on it and use the third person plural is if we're talking about things. So let's go ahead and take a look at these. And what I've done is I have given you a few expressions, and I've given you the everyday way that we would say these things in English. Remember that whenever you're saying things in Spanish, you're saying the same things that you would say in English. You've just got to say it in a different way. So with that in mind, let's look at the first one. Notice that doler is an O to UE stem changing verb. That means that the O is going to change to UE in everything but the nosotros form, or if we were studying it, the vosotros form as well. All right, so let's look at what we've got here. Me duele la panza. Me duele la panza literally means my stomach is hurting me. Please note that whenever we're talking about parts of the body or articles of clothing in a sentence, we nearly always are going to use the word the rather than the word my or our or your, rather than using a possessive adjective. We're going to use the article, the direct article. So, the definite article. So if I say me duele la panza, I'm saying the stomach hurts me, and I mean my stomach hurts me. What would we say in English? Well, in English, we would, of course, say, I've got a stomach ache. Let's go on to somebody else here. Le duele la panza a Juanito. Say that a few times until it comes out naturally. Le duele la panza a Juanito means Johnny's got a stomach ache. I'm saying to Johnny, the stomach hurts him. Johnny's got a stomach ache. Le duele la panza a Juanito. Maybe I want to ask you, I see you, it looks like you're grimacing. I might ask you, have you got a toothache? Well, what I'm going to say is a tooth hurting you? Te duele una muela. Te duele una muela. Te duele una muela. Practice saying these a few times. Te duele una muela. Try to say it just as though you would be saying this to somebody else. Maybe I want to announce that Sylvia has got an earache. So I'm going to say, a Silvia le duele el oído. A Silvia le duele el oído. I'm going to say it again. A Silvia le duele el oído. I'm saying the ear hurts her. And who's she? Sylvia. To Sylvia, the ear hurts her. So enough of the technical stuff. You see where I'm going with this. It works just like Gustar did. Maybe I want to say grandma's knees hurt. A la abuelita le duelen las rodillas. A la abuelita le duelen las rodillas. All right, let's look at another verb that works like this. In English, oftentimes we'll talk about loving something. I love Mexican food. We love to go fishing. She loves to drive big cars. Well, in Spanish, it would sound a little funny if I used the verb amar for that. Usually amar implies an affectionate love. All right, so I'm not going to use that. Generally speaking, I'm going to use the verb encantar. Encantar literally means to delight or to charm. All right, and I'm going to use it in the third person, singular and plural, encanta, encantan. But I'm going to use that oftentimes to talk about loving something or loving to do something. So if I wanted to say, I love dogs, me encantan los perros. Remember that we use the word the in Spanish more than we do in English because we often use the word the in Spanish, either el, la, los, or las, when we're talking about things in general. So I love dogs in a general sense, not just those particular dogs. So I'm going to say, me encantan los perros. All right, I want to say, my parents love Italian food. A mis padres les encanta la comida italiana. A mis padres les encanta la comida italiana. Once again, I encourage you to try to practice saying these. I want to say, my daughter loves to sing. So, a mi hija le encanta cantar. A mi hija le encanta cantar. So that is how we're going to use the verb encantar. Notice that we use it with the indirect object pronouns. It works just like gustar does. All right, let's move on. Let's look at another one. Here's an interesting verb here, the verb faltar. Faltar means to be lacking or to be missing. To be lacking or to be missing. Falta or faltan. Usually we're going to use that in the third person. So, if I want to say, I don't have energy today, I'm lacking energy, I can say, me falta energía. What if I've got a neighbor who's got a screw loose or is missing a marble? Well, I can say that in Spanish. Al vecino le falta una canica. The neighbor is missing a marble. We've all had some neighbors like that at some point or another, probably. All right, what if the students are missing their school supplies? They don't have them. Well, I'll say, a los alumnos les faltan sus útiles. The word útiles is used in Mexico and in Central America for school supplies. A los alumnos les faltan sus útiles. And you can see I say faltan. I say that in the plural. Why? Well, because, after all, útiles is plural. All right, let's look at another one here. Notice, I can use the verb faltar when I don't have an indirect object or an indirect object pronoun. If I just wanted to say there is a lack of something, like, for example, I might say, el problema es que falta respeto. The problem is there's a lack of respect. Okay, practice saying those, practice using those. You kind of have to wrap your brain around these a little bit because we're saying things kind of in a backwards way to what we'd say in English, but these are just basically contemporary expressions that you'll use in everyday conversation. Okay. Now let's talk about a related verb. We use the verb faltar, to be lacking, to be missing. Well, I can put that with the verb hacer, and then what I mean is to need, but to need in the sense of being short on, lacking something. Now, when I do that, the verb hacer is my verb. In the third person, hace or hacen. Remember that the verb hacer means to do or to make. It is a go-go verb, so I do or I make is hago, but the rest of it's regular. Haces, hace, hacemos, hacen. Remember that the H's are not pronounced. So hace falta means somebody needs something. Hacen falta means somebody needs some things. All right, so let's look at a few examples of this. Me hace falta dinero. I'm short on money. In other words, I have a lack of money. I need money, don't we all? A los muchachos les hace falta sueño. The kids are lacking sleep. In other words, they didn't get enough sleep. The kids didn't get enough sleep. A los muchachos les hace falta sueño. Nos hace falta estudiar más. We need to study more. We're lacking on our studies. There's a shortage of study on our part. So, nos hace falta estudiar más. In other words, studying more is lacking to us. So that's what we need. All right, so there's a related verb. Now let's go on and look at something else here. The verb importar looks an awful lot like the English word important, doesn't it? But it's a verb. Importante means important, but this is a verb. Importar means to matter, or to be important. And when I put it with an indirect object pronoun, I'm saying that something matters to somebody, something is important to somebody, and importan, I'm talking about more than one thing. So importa, importan. Now, the way this verb is used in contemporary speech or in everyday speech, I use this when I want to talk about caring or not caring about something, or when I want to talk about something matters to me or doesn't matter to me. So this is what I'll say. If I want to say I don't care, I'll say no me importa. Practice saying that a few times. No me importa. I don't care. No me importa. I want to say my sisters don't care about their studies. A mis hermanas no les importan sus estudios. Literally, I'm saying their studies do not matter to them. And who are they? My sisters. To my sisters, their studies do not matter to them. A mis hermanas no les importan sus estudios. That boy, all he cares about is rockets and robots. A ese muchacho solo le importan los cohetes y los robots. Now, you may be looking at the word robots, and you may be thinking, now, didn't you tell us that if a word ends with a consonant, you make it plural by adding es? Well, yes. There are just a few exceptions. The word robot came into English through the Czech language, and it came into Spanish the same way. So it's a foreign word to Spanish, and so it forms its plural by just adding an S. Fortunately, there aren't too many of those. But a ese muchacho solo le importan los cohetes y los robots. Now, please note that this word importar, that would be importa or importan, that word can be used without an indirect object pronoun as well, just to say that something doesn't matter. I can say, for example, el contexto importa mucho. Context matters a lot. Or no importa. It doesn't matter. Or never mind. Okay, here's another one. Interesar. The verb interesar means to interest or to be interesting to. So interesa or interesan are my third person singular and plural forms. So maybe I want to say, I'm interested in history. Me interesa la historia. Remember, H's are silent. Me interesa la historia. Maybe I want to tell somebody, hey, that's none of your concern. That doesn't interest you. A polite way to say, it's none of your business. I could say, eso no te interesa. Eso no te interesa. That doesn't concern you. Maybe I've got friends and all they care about, all they're interested in, is a certain thing. For example, a mis amigas solo les interesa ir de compras. All my friends are interested in is going shopping. A mis amigas solo les interesa ir de compras. So I hope that is helpful to you to get a little introduction on how to use these. There are quite a few of these. There are a number of verbs that do this. And so when you see them, though, they're all going to work the same way. They're all going to work just like the verb gustar. Practice using these. Practice trying to get them into your sentences. Like I said, you kind of have to wrap your brain around them a little bit. But this is how you say a lot of just ordinary, everyday things in Spanish. The same way as you'd say those ordinary, everyday things in English, but just kind of in a different word order, in a different way. So hopefully that will be helpful to you.